What's up, everyone? Welcome to Real Talk Real Estate. This is the David Greene Show live with some information about the impact that Trump's tariffs are having on the economy, as well as the economy itself. Is it doing good? Is it doing bad? Should you be running for the hills, screaming like Chicken Little, or should you batten the hatches and wait for the storm to pass? Or are we entering into a brand new era where the economy will take off like a rocket ship? We can just get these rates lower. We're going to be covering this today, as well as what the experts are saying from various news outlets and trying to piece them together to figure out what we can trust. If you're a real estate investor, if you're a wealth builder, if you're just trying to pay your bills, I think all of this stuff is relevant today. So we're going to be covering it. Let's jump into it.
Tonight, new inflation numbers are confirming what many economists have predicted, that Trump's tariffs would drive prices higher and higher. U.S. inflation accelerated in the month of June, according to the latest report, with the consumer price index rising 2.7% from a year earlier. The biggest driver, housing costs. But food and gas prices also rose. Economists were quick to react to the data. And I'm talking nonpartisan economists, the ones that work at banks. Okay, Bank America warning that the report provides, quote, ample evidence that the tariffs are being passed on to consumers. While Wells Fargo noted, quote, one of the top questions we get involves when will we see the impact of tariffs on consumer spending? The time is now. This morning, the president was asked for his reaction to the new numbers showing inflation rising, and this was the reaction.
Very slight. Essentially, they were exactly as anticipated. Very low inflation. So what you should do is lower the rate. The Fed should lower the rate immediately. We have a very, very successful country. We should have the...
All right, so this is basically them sharing news of him saying, hey, we haven't had inflation. The tariffs didn't cause any damage, so go ahead and lower the interest rates. Now, this is relevant because we don't have a video of it today, but in the past, if you watch the other videos that I put out, the head of the Fed, Jerome Powell, has said, I don't want to lower the rate until I know if tariffs that have been put in place are going to raise prices vis-a-vis create inflation. He thinks that if we lower rates when inflation's coming, prices will skyrocket. So he's looking at, I need to keep rates high to put pressure on inflation so it doesn't go up, because Trump is putting pressure on prices to go higher by passing the tariffs. And that's why this video is being shared sort of as a way to say, hey, Trump told us that there wasn't inflation, but now the experts are saying that there is.
Lowest interest rate anywhere in the world, and we don't. Jerome Powell has done a terrible job, and frankly, I don't think he could do a worse job. He's called everything wrong.
And let's be clear, Jerome Powell has said he would have lowered rates already had it not been for the tariffs. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also weighed in, revealing a, quote, formal process is now underway to find a nominee to replace Powell when his term as Fed chair ends in May 2026. Meanwhile, the president has announced a new preliminary trade deal with Indonesia. The U.S. will impose a 19% tariff. Jakarta has yet to confirm that deal. All right, let's bring in our leadoff panel. And you know we got to start with money, power, politics tonight. Natasha Stern joins us, former Treasury official and Yale law professor. Justin Wolfers, professor of economics and public policy at the University of Michigan. And John Allen, senior national politics reporter for NBC. Justin, we're going to get to the Fed chair in a minute, but let's start with just your take on these numbers.
Look, actually not quite that bad. It's pretty much a continuation of, we had very high inflation during the pandemic. Inflation came down to pretty close to being good, so around about 3%. And what's hard is getting that last little bit down to 2%. I really think of today's number as being not surprisingly terrible and not surprisingly wonderful. And actually, once in a while, that's good to say. Now, having said that, it's no surprise we're not seeing the main impact of the tariffs yet. The first big tariffs came through in April. It takes ships a month to get from China to the US, and those tariffs didn't apply to the ships that were already on their way. It takes a few weeks for stuff to get out of customs. So by now, the very first of those items now are going to be in the stock rooms.
This is a solid point when we were talking about why tariffs haven't hit. And we do need to acknowledge that there is a possibility that Trump was aware of this. I don't know that I think that he was. I just think he's too busy with other things to think about the details of the timeline here. But the point the gentleman is making is that, yeah, tariffs haven't caused prices to go up, because the goods themselves that had to be priced higher haven't made it into the US until right now. They had to be put on ships and sent all the way here. Then they had to be unloaded from the ships. Then they had to be put in trucks and driven to wherever they go. Then they had to make their way from the back storeroom to the shelves. And now that they're there, they're being priced higher than they previously were because of the tariffs. And so we're seeing the rise in prices.
A few companies, although they did stock up in advance. So if you haven't seen big tariff effects yet, you're going to see them sometime soon.
And let's talk about that, because the Yale Budget Lab has
Also, they say Australian accents are more trustworthy. Do you believe what this gentleman said, mostly because he's got an Australian accent? Let me know in the comments. Do you trust an Aussie?
estimated that Americans will face an overall average tariff rate of more than 18%. If the August 1st tariffs go into effect, that rises to more than 20%, the highest we have seen in more than a century. Natasha, where are we going to see these price hikes?
And you know what's interesting is I kind of agree with what some of the economists that you started quoting at the beginning, Stephanie, were saying. You are actually starting to see it in the data. It's when you start to unpack the data and you look at the fact that consumer electronics prices are ticking up. If you look at the fact that this category of goods called household furnishings, that includes furniture, it includes goods that are home goods, those prices are rising already substantially. And so what I think is also important to note is that this inflation print tells us that basically however you want to cut inflation, if you want to look at core inflation, if you want to exclude shelter, if you want to include shelter, exclude used cars, include used cars, essentially on every metric, the 1 month number is higher than the 3 month number. And what that means is we are starting to see these price effects and we're going to continue to see them in the months ahead.
Justin, the Wall Street Journal reports that in June alone, the Treasury collected $27 billion in customs revenue. That is up $20 billion from a year earlier. The White House and others are going to see that number as a big win. Can you explain to us what's really going on?
Yeah, like this, I love this. It's the favorite MAGA talking point right now. They've just discovered that if you impose a tax on people, it raises tax revenue. Very interesting fact. A tariff is a tax. It's a tax on Americans. There's no dispute about that. If you impose high taxes, you'll get a lot of tax revenue. The real question is this a tax that is equitable? Well, no, this is a tax that's going to be paid by working and middle-class Americans more than the rich. Is this a tax that's efficient?
Are we getting sneezes on the news live? I don't know that I've heard this before. I mean, the guy's recording from his bedroom with believe wall art that looks like his fourth grader probably made it for him. I'm halfway expecting to see a lava lamp in the background here. He just opened up his laptop in the bedroom. But I'll tell you what, that accent, it sure sounds believable right now. And he's not really qualifying a lot of the points that he's making, but I don't know it matters if he's an Aussie. And do you think he's wearing basketball shorts right now in his suit top? And what do you think I'm wearing right now as far as shorts go? Let me know in the comments.
No, it's going to distort all sorts of things. And is this a tax that's in Americans' best interests? Well, when I look at the new special Brazil insurrectionist defense fund that we're paying for, no, I don't think that's in America's best interests either.
John, the president ran on bringing prices down, certainly not driving them up. He said he was going to bring down prices on day one. A couple months after, he talked to our colleague, Kristen Welker. He said, well, it's a little more complicated than that. Doesn't happen overnight, but they're not going down overnight. As the months tick on, they're going up. How's he going to spin this? Hope we don't notice?
I mean, he'll do what he's done before, which is sort of make up a new line of argument. He not only did he say that he was going to slow the rate of inflation, he actually said he was going to eliminate inflation, that we would have 0% inflation, which of course most economists would tell you would be terrible economically. But we are seeing it tick up. And I think, as you pointed out in the opening, and as the other guests have pointed out, I mean, this is the beginning. If the policy continues, you can expect like boiling water heating up on a stove that at some point you're going to feel very burned. But in the first few months, first few minutes in terms of the stove and the boiling water, you might not feel it. I think most projections I've seen, and I have no reason not to trust them, are that this is just going to burn more and more. And it will be very difficult to unwind if that happens.
All right, just a new topic. Let's talk about Jay Powell. because JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon actually defended Jay Powell against the president's attacks, saying, quote, "The independence of the Fed is absolutely critical, and playing around with the Fed can have adverse consequences. The absolute opposite of what you might be hoping for." It is very rare for a CEO, especially one of Jamie Dimon's level, especially Jamie Dimon himself, somebody whose name has been tossed around for Treasury Secretary before. What is your take on him doing that? Almost sounds like he's giving a warning to the White House, but careful what you wish for.
I think he is quite literally speaking on behalf of Wall Street. Look, the one thing Wall Street wants, and in fact our economy wants, is financial stability. If you put a clown in charge of the Fed, the clown could do all sorts of bad things. The most likely outcome would be very, very high inflation. When I say very high inflation, the last global leader who tried this trick was in Turkey, where they enjoyed inflation as high as 85%. That would wipe out American financial markets and possibly cause all sorts of ructions that will make 2008 seem like a pleasant dream by comparison. So, if you appoint someone who knows what they're doing, everything's going to be all right. Remember, though, at the end of the last Trump administration, he tried to appoint literal charlatans, clowns, Judy Shelton, Stephen Moore. These are people who, even when they try and play economist on TV, they still end up looking awfully silly because they forget which way demand curves slope and which way demand curves and which way supply curves go. So he has shown he is willing to meddle with a very, very important economic institution.
Well, he's not the only one going after Jay Powell, John. Several months ago, when things were tense in the White House, I had reported that Secretary Bessent would love to exit the Treasury Secretary post and be the next Fed chair. His office denied it. But let's fast forward. You now have Scott Bessent going after, criticizing Jay Powell. You have Kevin Hassett criticizing Jay Powell, leaving out the fact that Scott Bessent may be the one looking to take Jay Powell's seat, or Kevin Hassett could take Jay Powell's seat, or Kevin Hassett could take Scott Bessent's seat if Bessent becomes the Fed chair. Does anyone realize that these people in the White House who are criticizing the Fed chair might just want his job?
Welcome to the viper's nest of a Trump White House. We've seen this before. And Trump loves nothing more than to, release the asps, in the same container. You've seen him do that certainly with Bessent and Lutnick, who, disdain each other and end up sitting next to each other at cabinet meetings. I think President Trump certainly knows, where Scott Bessent wants to land. And I think he enjoys pulling those strings and getting Bessent to make the argument against Powell. I mean, look, Wall Street is warning in the nicest possible terms, that in Dimon's terms, basically, that you need to preserve the independence of the Fed. And as Justin was just saying, I mean, if you start playing around with interest rates for short-term sugar highs, you really risk destabilizing the economy.
Well, what do we think, folks? Are we playing around for short-term sugar highs, or are we trying to prevent a massive, massive recession that would lead to nobody buying homes at all and the market just stalling out? I don't know. I don't think these guys are real estate experts. And they are, to be fair, not talking about mortgage rates. They're talking about interest rates on everything else, the prime rate. But from a real estate perspective, it is deeply concerning to me how people are not buying houses. And the problem is not supply. The problem is not demand. The problem is confidence, if you're asking me. Of course, it's subjective. All I can do is share my opinion here. But from what I see, people don't feel very good about the fact that they may not have a job because we haven't been talking a lot about how to get jobs going. I think Trump tried to affect this with the big, beautiful bill. I think he included things like no taxes on overtime, no taxes on tips to try to encourage people to go work more. It wasn't bad. I honestly think we needed more in this. I think we need job creation. I think we need to be bringing jobs back into America that we used to do in other places. All these places that we get lumber from somebody else and minerals from other places and gas and energy from other places. I'd love to see it get brought back here for the real estate market, because we need people working to be able to pay their rent and to be able to pay their mortgages and to keep the housing industry strong. Let's see what you guys have to say. Leif Larson, I think you were spot on a month back. Jobs and investment back to the U.S. Oh, this is what I was just saying. More pain in the short term, but more stability in the long run. Apple investing in rare earth minerals, for example. Leif sees the same thing that I'm seeing here. Michael and Haiti, I think the interest rates at where they are supposed to be. They like them right there. Yifty says, can you get approved for mortgage with 1 year of W-2 work if you weren't working the previous year? Yeah, we do have mortgages that we can do that with. Sometimes we can do conventional, sometimes not, but we have a lot of other loan options at the One Brokerage. So if you guys are listening to this and you're like, well, I have untraditional income, we specialize in this. We also specialize in the nice, easy ones. So if you just want a company that's going to take great care of you, get you a great loan, and be upfront and honest about everything with competitive rates and great service, we're here for you at the One Brokerage. Leif Larson also says this works great. The kids' bedtime has finally moved up an hour because he said that my schedule finally lines up to watch a live. Andrew Sheeprez says, thank you for a great show. Appreciate you guys. All right, let's get into our next video.
All right. We have a big special guest on set with us for an extended conversation this morning. We are very happy that Ken Langon is here. Of course, he's the Home Depot co-founder. He's currently chairman and president of Invamed Associates. And Ken, it's been far too long. We have missed you. We've been looking forward to what you have to say this morning.
I thought you were doing what they do with the Indians, taking them out to a tree and say, die there.
No, we've missed you. And we've been working a long time to try and get a date worked out.
I know.
You see, we're all here.
I know you're survivors.
But
I'm impressed.
Andrew's here today.
And you haven't killed each other yet.
Yeah,
Wow.
sometimes Andrew would not be here when you just by coincidence.
And
but
I think there's hope for Andrew.
I've noticed that too.
I had a nice chat
I've
with him
noticed
last
that too.
week.
Yeah.
And I honest to God think he's moving to see the light. He's all this
look at the alternative. Look at what the other side has become. I mean, come on. I mean,
he's naive, but he's not dumb. He sees what reality is. Okay?
Naive, not dumb. I'm gonna put that on my.
Take it.
Is this one of those guys that is going to look like he's 12 when he's 60? Is he one of those people those ears are going to continue growing, but the rest of his face doesn't? Like, I'm not hating. He's a handsome guy. Has a baby face, which I wish that I had. But I'm just curious if you think he's one of these people that will always look like this and barely change at all as he ages. And does this mean he's a vampire?
Take it in the
compliment. Naive, but not dumb.
Boy, you're certainly not dumb.
I still want on my epitaph.
I wish I had your gray matter.
That's really long.
That's really Warren, right?
Really old age. Yeah, that's what Warren always says. Ken, why don't we just talk about how you're feeling right now, what you see in the economy, what you see happening in the markets, what you think about the country, because it's been so long since we've gotten to check in with you.
If I told you how bullish I was, you wouldn't believe it. I have never been more excited about the future of America than I am right now, right this time.
Wow.
For a lot of reasons. Number one, like it or not, this guy's getting things done.
This guy meaning President Donald Trump?
Trump. He's a little pissed off at me because I had the audacity to say that on television about a few months ago that I was worried about it, if he won, that he'd engage in retribution. I'm happy to say I'm comfortable he's not doing that. He's acting presidential. I'm impressed with the people he's got around him. I had a nice chat with Kevin Warsh last week, and part of my positivity comes from my discussion with him. And you might have heard him on television. I think the American people are waking up. I think the world is a mess, but I think it's coming more to our direction than it was. I think that strike in Iran had significant symbolic meaning for the world, that America is here, and when our interests are at risk, we're going to do something about it. On the other hand, I'm terribly, terribly disturbed with the anti-Semitism that's going on in America, particularly among young people. That scares me.
I wonder what they're thinking when this guy gets brought on to talk about the economy and he starts talking about Iran nuclear facility strikes and anti-Semitism. And I'm curious if someone will try to be able to tie this back in somehow to the economy. He's also saying some positive things about Donald Trump, which it doesn't sound like they were expecting him to. Usually on CNBC, I get the opposite side. I can kind of bring the anti-Trump perspective, or maybe not anti-Trump, but anti-Trump's decisions perspectives on the economy, like the first video. And I think he surprised everybody here.
And I'm vocal about it. I'm very vocal about it because so much of my life has evolved around Jews, all to the good. Doctors, friends, business partners, you name it. And I don't understand the Jews sometimes, though. 30% of the Jewish vote voted for this guy last week in New York.
Mom Donnie.
After what he said, I mean, give me a break. I'm telling you, I got hope for this kid. This kid, we're gonna have him in a tent pretty soon. What else? I think that this big better bill, whatever the hell I call it.
One big beautiful bill.
Right. I was worried about inflation and I was worried about the deficit. I think there's a lot of merit to the notion that it's going to trigger such significant economic growth that we might see tax revenues going up through the profitability.
Well, that's a breath of fresh air. I haven't heard a whole lot of people talking about this yet.
Exactly. And the other last thing is you can't keep America down. Don't forget that. We're the greatest country on earth and will always will be. And you just can't keep us down. And I'm looking forward to my 90th birthday in a couple of months.
Happy almost birthday.
Thank you. And I'm excited about it. I just wish I could figure a way out to live 90 more years because I think the best is yet to come. What more can I say?
You're like, in my view, you're like a walking George Bailey. If there was no Ken Langon in the world, it'd be a different place.
Oh yeah, hell, God, come on.
In a good way.
I'm an accident. I'm an accident.
Langon Medical Center. I can't turn on TV without hearing Langon.
Let me tell you,
look what you've done in your life, Ken.
If there's anything that's given me more satisfaction, other than my family and my wife, it's the medical center. I mean, what that place,
I would hope
that
so.
place is crushing it like you can't believe. This guy that we had the wisdom to pick the leaders, Bob Grossman.
Right.
He's fabulous. And look at where we stand. Yeah, I mean, the thing I really love the most is when people from other medical institutions call us and say, can we come to New York and sit with you? We'd like to know how you guys did it. We were on our ass. Don't forget, when I took this job 26 years ago, we were...
As the chairman.
As chairman. We were 68th or 69th. Number one now.
Well, there's the chairman, or the co-founder, I should say, of Home Depot that believes we're heading in a good direction in the country. There's not a lot of that. Leif Larson said he's just chatting about whatever comes to mind. It sure looked that way. It didn't seem like he had any direction of where he was going with that. But that is an experienced businessman who thinks that the big, beautiful bill is probably going to move things in a good direction. I would love to find some more insight. If you guys have any videos of someone breaking down how they think the big, beautiful bill is going to shake out, and if we are going to see like a recovery, especially with housing, I'd love to cover that. I'm having a really hard time finding anything on the internet about housing. What everyone does is they look at what we have and they look backwards and they say, here's what happened historically. Here's where things went, or here's where things are right now. People aren't buying houses as much. But I'm trying to figure out, where do people think it's going to be going? And I don't know what it is. Like, very few people think about real estate from that perspective like I do. What areas are going to be growing? When are they going to be growing? How is government policy going to affect what happens to rents, what happened to values, and what parts of the country it's going to work in? We just had bonus depreciation passed. Does anybody think that we're going to be seeing a return in the demand and the values for real estate that's kind of stalled out right now in a lot of markets across the country? Christian Batchelder and I recently just covered that on an episode that we just recorded for Mortgage Monday. So make sure that you're following the David Greene Show, and you'll check out Mortgage Monday when it comes out, as we cover how we can expect this to impact real estate values and how you can take advantage of it if you want to save some taxes yourself.
Office, there was a widespread anxiety that his economic program of tariffs and tax cuts would be bad for the American economy. Economists warned that his tariffs would push up inflation and slow down the economy, while his tax cuts would make the American tax system even more aggressive, while putting a potentially lethal strain on America's public finances. However, while there was some turmoil early on, in recent months the American economy seems to have stabilized and has actually been looking pretty strong, at least by international standards. So in this video, we're going to try our best to explain how the American economy apparently dodged disaster and whether it can last. In the latest issue of our magazine, Too Long, we dive deep into the current state of America, discussing our real thoughts on the state of American democracy, soft power, universities, and the countries that could steal their crown, from China to the EU. Find out more about Too Long, the end of the American order, the strongest GDP, productivity, and wage growth in the G7. And investors dismiss Trump's talk of massive tariffs as campaign bluster, betting that, like in his first term, Trump would be sensitive to market pressures, which would essentially prevent him from doing anything too unorthodox. This is why ahead of Trump's inauguration, the dollar surged, with both the S&P 500, an index of the 500 leading companies listed on the US stock exchange, and the dollar index, which measures the value of the dollar against a weighted basket of currencies, rising after Trump's victory on November 5th. However, once Trump actually came to office, it quickly became clear that this optimism was misplaced. On day one, Trump started whacking tariffs on his trading partners, and it quickly became clear that Trump was genuinely committed to his tariff agenda and less sensitive to market pressures than in his first term, with both the president and senior members of his team dismissing the declines in the S&P 500 as merely noise. Similarly, it quickly became apparent that DOGE, the main vehicle for Trump's deregulatory agenda, was both less effective than expected and also more focused on filling the civil service with Trump law.
Okay, do we think Doge was less effective than expected? Did I make that rhyme? Effective than expected. Yeah, that did sound pretty good, didn't it? Because Elon got his panties in a wad and quit early and stopped working with the team that was supposed to keep going, because him and Trump got into one of the all-time most famous I am rubber and you are glue arguments that we've ever seen in the world. Or was it just that Doge wasn't effective, the people weren't smart enough, and there wasn't enough waste to cut? I mean, that seems to me, as an unexperienced non-politician, pretty obvious that Elon was like, I'm not going to help with this anymore because the big, beautiful bill is adding too much debt to what we already have and getting rid of the electrical vehicle mandates. And then that whole weird thing that happened with NASA and his buddies not getting the position that he wanted. I don't know why they don't mention that when they say this, but I don't think that was fair.
Loyalists than actually cutting federal spending or red tape. The economy duly started showing signs of strain in March, when survey data suggested that both business and consumer confidence had plummeted, and that the Atlanta Fed's GDP Now forecast, a real-time estimate of GDP, suddenly started predicting a vicious recession. But things got particularly dicey on April 2nd, when, as you might remember, Trump declared Liberation Day and announced a flat 10% tariff on all imports coming into the US, as well as further flat tariffs on basically all of America's trading partners, calculated spuriously by dividing each country's bilateral trade deficit with the US against its total exports to give a percentage, which Trump then halved if he felt like it. This sparked a steep decline in the S&P 500, which fell by about 10% in a week, as well as a furious tit-for-tat trade war with China. And by mid-April, both countries had imposed tariffs over 100% on each other, basically ending all trade between the world's two largest economies. However, in the past couple of weeks, the American economy has All
right, if that's true, if we've ended all trade from the two largest economies, which I don't know, I'm not an expert, that seems very unlikely. I think we're still getting quite a few things from China. When I order stuff on Amazon, it still shows up. Could that be good? Or is this just all bad? Could there be positive in that this puts pressure on the US to manufacture its own stuff, brings jobs back here, and even though the things are going to be more expensive if they're made here, we now collect more income tax from our workers. We have more workers that are earning money, which they spend in the US instead of sending it to China. And it's sort of like, instead of taking blood from our body and sending it overseas to be a blood transfusion over somewhere else, which in this case, the analogy is the money, we keep the blood circulating through our own system and we create more of it, even though the goods are more expensive. Let me know in the comments or in the chat what you think about this. Is it all horribly bad, or could there be a silver lining if indeed we've ended all trade with China? Like this gentleman who is swimming in his t-shirt says.
Apparently regained its footing. The S&P 500 is back up to a record high. Inflation has only come in a smidge above the Federal Reserve's 2% target for the past 3 months, and the odds of recession have now fallen dramatically, with both the IMF and OECD now forecasting that America will once again see the strongest growth in the G7 this year. And while the dollar has still trended downwards, it's above the recent historical average. And while Treasury yields have tended upwards, they're still within the normal range for the past couple of years. Most recently, last month's jobs report massively outperformed expectations, with 147,000 new jobs added in June, while other recent survey data suggests that business and consumer confidence is recovering. So what actually happened here? How has the US economy apparently survived Trump's tariffs, which economists almost unanimously expected to trigger economic disaster? Well, the first thing to say is that it's important not to overstate all of this. Sure, the American economy isn't headed for a recession, but its growth rate has slowed from between 2 and 3% to somewhere between 1 and 2%. It's also worth saying that inflation is still higher than the Fed's target, and it's expected to rise to nearer 3% in the coming months. Some of this is also the consequence of Trump's constant flip-flopping on tariffs, which has meant that his most dramatic tariffs have either not come into effect, as was the case with his proposed Liberation Day tariffs on the EU, or has been wound down somewhat, as has been the case with its tariffs on China. To be clear, America's tariff rate is still pretty high by historical standards. The effective tariff rate currently stands at about 12%, according to calculations by the Tax Foundation, its highest in nearly a century. But the potential inflationary effects of this have also been offset by businesses who have tried to keep prices flat, even if they've been affected by these tariffs. This is also because of front-loading, i.e. businesses stockpiling imports ahead of the tariffs, but also because even if they've exhausted these front-loaded stockpiles, businesses have so far been happy to accept lower profits rather than increasing prices, because they don't want to irritate customers when there's a good chance that Trump will reverse his tariffs later. It's also worth mentioning that quite a lot of this nominal growth is driven by debt-funded government spending. Thanks in large part to Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, the US is expected to run a budget deficit representing between 6 and 7% of GDP for the foreseeable future. The relationship here isn't straightforward. It's not like a 6% deficit basically adds 6% to GDP, but a deficit of this size will still create a pretty big boost to aggregate GDP, especially because much of the fiscal stimulus in the Big Beautiful Bill is front-loaded over the next year or two. And while Treasury yields aren't high enough to trigger an acute fiscal crisis in the near term, America's fiscal situation is still clearly unsustainable. But the final reason that the US continues to do all right is that, well, there just aren't that many better options out there. This is why American bonds, stocks, and the dollar are still doing okay. Whatever anxieties investors might have about Trump and his agenda, there aren't that many obvious alternatives. Europe is looking at even slower growth than the US, and no national bond market is as deep or liquid as the Treasury market. The CCP's penchant for capital controls means that China isn't the most attractive place for foreign investment either, and other emerging market economies are struggling to deal with turmoil triggered by Trump's tariffs. So without a clear alternative, America's economy will continue to benefit from its status as the go-to haven for foreign capital. This is a complex and nuanced story, though, and as such, there's plenty more you can read about it online, with 73 sources reporting on it. The issue is, how can you be sure that what you're reading isn't totally biased? Well, that's a problem we face when writing these videos too, and luckily, that's where this week's sponsor, Ground News, comes in. For this story in particular, they've identified that there are at least 17 left-leaning and 5 whose incredible website and app lets you discover the news feed. It presents you with stories helping you keep has to offer. You can get 40%.
Well, that ended before that I thought it would. Again, negativity, not feeling good, and basically just saying that because America is a world power, we get away with stuff that other people don't. That's kind of Trump's whole point of why he's trying to get other countries to put a better plan in place to rule America. Let's see what Larry has to say about it. Good old trustworthy Larry.
Bring in Deputy Treasury Secretary, my good friend, Michael Faulkner. Michael Faulkner, what do you say? The Wall Street Journal and the New York Times are blaming tariffs for the inflation rate today, which was still a pretty good inflation rate. But anyway, what's your take on it?
Larry, I think your riff nailed it, but let me add a couple more things in there. We need to remember that, we did have the 12-day war in Iran, between Israel and Iran during that month. And so if you look at the oil price hike, the energy price hike, it's largely attributable to that, which of course has come back down since since the president intervened and resolved that situation. And then the other big contributor to inflation continues to be housing, which we know is measured with a lag. And oh, by the way, has no tariff implications to it. So if you look at the actual biggest contributors, and then let me add one more thing, is that if you look at the core CPI number, it came in below expectations. It came in at only 0.2. And so you're right, when you start annualizing the CPI number for the period during which President Trump has been in office, that number is coming in at or below the Fed's target inflation rate. And when you then compare that to where the Fed has inflation, or where the Fed has interest rates right now, it does cause you to question whether or not the Fed's in the right spot, given where the inflation is at under the Trump administration. And as you also said, that's before you get into the pro-supply side, pro-growth components of the tax reform bill that we got the president to sign earlier this month.
I mean, I know these lefty newspapers. I get that. I understand that. But the numbers are the numbers. So Mr. Trump's been in office. He was sworn in, January 15th. He was inaugurated. So I use January as a base. 5 months. February, March, April, May, June. Okay, is that 5 months? I get that right? The inflation rate on the CPI is 1.8% at an annual rate. That's it. 1.8% at an annual rate. Tariffs or no tariffs, 1.8% at an annual rate. And at 80,000 prices, you're an economist. You used to teach school at Maryland before you took this lofty position you have now. You're an economist. Some prices rise every month and some prices fall every month, but the index is hardly moving.
That's right. I mean, you can cherry pick all you want because of the enormous number in there. We could focus on other things that have come significantly down in price. But if you look at the large components of, the American people's budget, we are seeing that the overall index is getting back to below the target that the Fed has set. And if that's the case, then it's time for us to align monetary policy with the success that the president's fiscal and economic policies are having. And we need to recognize that the numbers that are coming in, as you said, the data that is showing up in what people are actually paying at the grocery store, at the pump, and at the mall is coming back down to where the inflation target is. And so, the president's economic plan is working. And as we get this bill implemented, Larry, as you know, my job for the first 6 months of this administration was to get that reconciliation bill to the president's desk. The next 6 months, it's about getting that bill implemented so that the American people can start realizing the success of the president's economic agenda.
Mike Faulkner, it's just 30 seconds, last 30 seconds. Deputy Secretary Faulkner, do you think that the Federal Reserve Board and Jay Powell have conformed in their building, which is $700 million overrun, have conformed to the National Capital Planning Commission specifications? Do you think they have?
Larry, I think that Russ Vought asked excellent questions of the chairman as to whether or not the plan that he is implementing and overseeing is aligned with the plan that they have submitted. And so either there are features in there that are conforming with the plan he submitted, but if that's the case, then why didn't he say so to the Congress when he was testifying? So the OMB director asked some excellent questions, and
all right, this is all about the plan to try to get Jerome Powell out of the Fed because they don't like that he's not lowering rates. So there's been all this talk about how he wasted money on the renovation. It kind of seemed like a nothing burger when I first heard it, more like the typical tactics that Trump will often use, where he wants to scare you to get you to do what he's trying to get you to do. People like it. People hate it. Some people are neutral. In fact, hardly anybody's neutral. What am I talking about? People either like it or they hate it. But sometimes you got to learn to read between the lines with this stuff. That didn't seem like a big enough reason to get somebody out. And I don't think that it was going to work. It definitely got everyone's attention, though. And we've all been talking about it. And now it looks like it's nothing. All right, let's get into this video about why the Fed would want to fight growth and what might motivate them to do so.
Next up is a very dear friend of mine who would like to see Powell fired and is interested in the position himself. His name is David Malpass. He's former head of the World Bank. Before that, he was Undersecretary of the Treasury. He's scrapping in here. Here's my buddy. Op-ed piece, the Fed is behind the curve on cutting interest rates. Maybe we have a tear sheet. It was out a few weeks ago. David, they are behind the curve. Why are they behind the curve?
Larry, their models are wrong. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.
So the Fed actually wants to fight growth. Their whole concept is if you overheat, then you should have high interest rates. The problem is that undercuts production. So if we're working to have a manufacturing economy where people invest in the U.S. and we're the hottest economy and money is coming in, why are our rates way higher than Europe and Japan? Doesn't make any sense. If you have a hot economy, you should be cutting, and you can cut, and the money will beat its path to your door.
I don't see any inflation. I mean, we've had new inflation reports for June. CPI less than 2%. PPI is practically zero for the last 5 months. Where's the inflation?
There's not inflation, so that's an opportunity to cut, but their models are screwed up. They've always been too late. If you look back into the 1990s and the 2000s, they were a lagging indicator of the reality of the world.
That's what Trump says. By the way, you say it in here. It's a very interesting thing. The Fed is looking through the rear view mirror. What you mean by that?
That phrase you invented, and it's a brilliant phrase. So if you're driving in your car and you're trying to drive forward and you're looking back, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to run into things. So the Fed repeatedly runs into stuff. It hurts, and I really think we need a remake of the Fed that gives us a growth basis for small businesses in the U.S. That right now, the Fed, they've paid, people don't know this, $1.3 trillion to banks and money market funds so they can maintain this huge portfolio of theirs. They're just in the middle of, it's a temple.
And they're losing money.
And they're
losing money.
They're losing money, and they're paying out cash flow. If any hedge fund did that, they'd be fired.
Listen, they're doing what that bank, Silicon Valley Bank did. There's the same thing, right? Portfolios underwater. Their interest expense is greater than the interest they take in. It's unbelievable. And they have the printing presses.
The Fed is the deepest of the deep state. So to retrench them, to get them out, is going to be lots of work. But I think you have to do it from a model standpoint. We need a growth model.
Change the model for me.
Change the model.
Change the model for me right here.
Higher interest rates they stop the production in the economy. Lower interest rates will make it go. So a starting point is that. Also, the inflation targeting is the wrong metric. There's no way to actually calculate and keep track of inflation, and it's so lagging. It really is last year's number. So we're seeing whatever inflation we did have now would be Biden's inflation. So looking forward, you've got to calculate the energy dominance, the crypto dominance that the U.S. can do. The dollar as a reserve currency, money will just flood into the U.S. and support lower rates across the yield curve. We're talking about the 10-year bond yield going down along with the short-term interest rates.
And the technology revolution, the AI revolution, the base power revolution, all this. I don't know. He's got thousands of economists, Jay Powell, chair, we're calling him. We got that. What do they explain? They're like missing the whole story of modern day America.
Economics is the dismal science. They really don't like it when we grow. And a problem, and it really makes me mad, is the Fed has been supporting this income differential. If you think of why are median income down? Think through the Obama years. Horrible years for the American worker, even as the Fed was printing or expanding their balance sheet.
Yeah. Yes, sir. All right.
We can change it. It can change overnight by Trump.
David Malpass, the Fed is behind the curve on cutting interest rates. Its flawed models depend on slowing growth to avoid overheating, whatever that means. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right, let's see what some of your comments are. Leif Larson regarding Doge, unfortunately not as effective as hoped. Isn't it crazy how quickly news cycles come in? I mean, this was all people were talking about. All people were talking about was Doge, cutting, ruining the country, saving the country, and no one talks about it at all. At all. We just move on to the next thing. That's insane to me. Alexander Yates says we'd start getting less cheap junk. Haha, landfills would be emptier. Regarding what would happen if we stopped shipping things over from China. Yeah, I'm not mad about that at all. I think that's a really good point. We'd have a lot less waste for the environment. NC0 Baller says, I'm investing heavily right now, closing on 5 properties on the 31st. Well, congratulations on that. Hopefully that we are helping to finance those. Let's see if we can get you on the podcast and talk about the properties that you just bought. And Alexander says self-storage might be less needed if we're buying less stuff from China. And then NC0 Baller, probably North Carolina, I'm going to guess. I will try and shoot you an email. Super busy right now. Need to pick your brain on the best way to finance some renovations. There you have it, folks. Things are changing. The big, beautiful bill has passed. We're going to be seeing a lot of these changes come in place. I really, really hope that it gets people working and gets money changing hands again. This economy needs it. We need jobs. We need people working. Pray for America. No matter how you feel about whoever is in office, we're all the same side here. Let's remember that. Pray for the real estate market because we need it to start moving again. Thanks, everybody. Remember to leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about the show. Subscribe to the channel and send me any videos that you would like me to cover. You can go to davidgreene24.com/ask. Submit your questions there, or you can send me a video on your favorite social media. Instagram is probably the one I check the most, and I'll cover them here. See you guys later.